Welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Shift podcast. My name is Patricia. I'm here today to speak to you about something really important. Before we begin, I really want to name something gently. If you're here because you care deeply about how you show up as a parent, if you're aware, reflective, and intentional, and yet you still find yourself replaying moments where you reacted, raised your voice, or didn't show up the way that you had hoped, I want you to know that this space is not here to ask more of you. There's nothing you need to prove, nothing you need to get right while you're listening, nothing you need to fix about yourself to be welcomed here. Many conscious parents carry a quiet weight after a hard moment, not just responsibility, but a kind of inner punishment. An internal tightening that says, I should have known better by now. A better parent wouldn't have done this. I need to be harder on myself so I don't do it again. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not failing. Today's conversation is not about avoiding responsibility. It's about untangling responsibility from threat. Because when responsibility collapses your nervous system, it doesn't lead to change, it leads to contraction. In this episode, we're going to talk about what responsibility can feel like when it's held without self-attack, what repair looks like when it comes to regulation, not shame, and why safety inside you has always been the condition for lasting change. As you listen, let your body settle in whatever way it needs. You don't need to agree with everything. You don't need to take any notes. You don't need to do anything with this right this moment. Just let yourself be here. Let this be a place where responsibility can soften without disappearing, and where change becomes possible because your system finally feels safe enough to learn. With that being said, let's dive into this week's episode. As a parent, I've always felt after really intense moments that I felt a lot of responsibility, and it always felt heavy. And I know other parents feel the exact same way after intense moments. Every time I would mess up, I would turn in on myself and say, I should know better than this. I know better than this. Why do I keep showing up like that? And it's very hard because I have this responsibility that I put on myself. It's a quiet tension that I have in my body every single time that I may fall back on old ways of being. This is completely normal, especially as a conscious parent who is actively looking to relax their nervous system, make changes, and change generational patterns. It's not easy being a conscious parent, and a lot of the responsibility comes with a lot of self-pressure. And that self-pressure is something we put on ourselves as parents. This episode is not about avoiding responsibility of that pressure, but it's about removing the nervous system threat that's attached to it. And we've been talking a lot about nervous system. It's because it's something that is very important as a conscious parent to regulate so that you can change those patterns and change those cycles. Nothing here requires you to be better, only more honest and more safe with yourself. So let's dive in a little bit more. Many of us may have learned responsibility through being punished ourselves, or maybe we had a withdrawal of love from our parents or grandparents, and that was the way they taught us responsibility. Back in the day, I remember, if you do this, then I'm not going to take you here. And that was a punishment. Or if you choose this action, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Or there was a lot of shame and disappointment or fear. A lot of fear-based parenting is what our millennial group is working through to heal. Feeling that shame and disappointment and fear is now creating a responsibility on us so intense that when we may fall back on what we've always known, we feel such an intense pressure to change. And that doesn't impact our nervous system in a positive way. It actually puts a lot of stress on our nervous system to always feel like we have to show up with perfection. But it's always going to be presence over perfection, and I've said that before. A lot of the self-belief that we've had is if I hurt someone, I must hurt myself. And that's where that self-pressure comes in. It's a conditioning. It's not accountability. It's the way that we've been conditioned as people, as children who are growing up in a very different time. We were conditioned that our responsibility would come through punishment, withdrawal of love, shame, fear. It's conditioning. It's not accountability. And these can show up in parenting as replayed moments of thinking about how you were treated when you were growing up. Or maybe as internal lectures of, I saw my parents do this and I don't want to do that, and I did it. And that's an internal lecture that you're telling yourself. You're constantly speaking to yourself about the internal lecture. It can also show up as self-disgust after reactions. Maybe you feel like, I can't believe I just did that. And I really want to stress here that shame is not responsibility. It's how responsibility was taught to unsafe systems. So in no way is punishment, withdrawal of love, shame, disappointment, fear, none of that is going to create a safe nervous system. And what we're doing now in changing cycles and breaking cycles and changing generational patterns is healing that. And healing that through healing our nervous system, so that when we show up for our kids, we can show up with one of our regulated nervous system, which in turn then helps create different pattern changes and creates new legacy and lineage in your family line. And that's so powerful as a conscious parent. That is what our conscious parenting is looking for. When we self-attack, there's different things that happen in our nervous system. And we're going to break some of those down and talk a little bit about what happens with that nervous system when we have that self-punishment. I just want to touch here that last week I spoke a little bit about capacity and how capacity has a direct impact on our nervous system. So does self-punishment. A lot of times self-punishment comes from the lack of capacity that we have, and then it's just a vicious cycle that we go through. So what exactly happens in the body when we self-attack? So number one, the threat stays online. You're going to feel an increased state of your nervous system. You're going to feel in that flight or fright or freeze mode. And you're going to feel that your capacity narrows to be able to handle various situations that come up in your life in the day. Your learning in those moments also shuts down. So what we learned is that when your learning shuts down and your capacity narrows, the threats are always there, and it's really hard for our nervous system to regulate, which in turn is really challenging for us to parent from a conscious parenting, breaking cycles pattern to be able to create and help those children, our children, the way that we anticipate helping. But although self-protection may feel productive, it's actually the quite opposite. It's the opposite, because when we punish ourselves, it's like a constant way of having to climb out of a state of being. When I was in a freeze mode for the better half of 2.5 years, there was a lot of self-punishment in that. Almost every day I would look at myself and be like, I should be doing better. I should be doing things differently. I know that I need to do things differently. Why can't I do things differently? I was in a constant state of self-punishment whenever I would react to something or flap the handle with something, and a lot of guilt with that as well as a parent. And that's not a really great place to be constantly, because the nervous system was continuously elevated for myself, and that freeze mode continued. Now, there was a lot of other variables that went into the reason of the freeze mode, but it was mainly like the self-punishment felt productive for me, so that's why I would continue doing that. But it delays the integration of the learnings, right? So yeah, we can self-punish and we can feel productive, but what about the learnings that we've accomplished? That would delay the calibration of those learnings into our body, into our nervous system. And what we're looking to do is create that regulated nervous system, which comes with time. So it comes with continuous effort. It comes with continuous ways of being. And the self-punishment really delayed that integration of those learnings. It's so ironic, because the harder that we are on ourselves, the longer those old patterns stay. And I know for myself, and I know for a lot of parents out there, we want those patterns to change. That's why we're doing the work. That's why we're here. That's why we're always looking at ways of regulating ourselves, and always looking at new ways of learning and being and healing and changing patterns and breaking the cycles, because we want new patterns to be created. But it's so ironic, because the harder that we're on ourselves, the longer those patterns stay. If you keep repeating a behavior, it's not because you don't care. Self-punishment feels like responsibility. It feels responsible, but it actually freezes that change. So our nervous system isn't able to relax. We're in that freeze mode. And I want you just to come back to this whenever you need it. What if we could shift that accountability without self-attack? What if we could have accountability for the action without that dysregulation of our nervous system and continuous need to feel that guilt and shame and fear? Awareness plus repair plus support equals responsibility. So if we have awareness, we're able to repair, we're able to support the action, and that is the responsibility. And if we can reframe responsibility from being in a heightened state of nervous system response, it's the awareness and repair is more important than what happened, the event that actually happened, and it will allow us to regulate our nervous system so that we can integrate the learning so that we can then move on and break cycles going forward. So let's contrast two different inner responses. Self-attack often looks like, what is wrong with me? Why did I do that? I ask this question all the time. There's no point in time that I haven't asked this question to myself. What is wrong with me? Why did I do that? What is wrong with me? Why did I behave that way? Just this past weekend, I had a heightened nervous system, and I know that I did because I was reacting very quickly. And at the end of the day, I was like, what is wrong with me? What is going on? Why am I showing up this way when I know I have the tools and I know I have the ability to do the things to elevate and maintain my nervous system? Instead, what I tried to do was shift the response to something happened here and I want to understand what happened. So instead of what's wrong with me, you can acknowledge, take awareness, something happened here. And then the repair and support. I want to understand what happened. Responsibility doesn't require emotional collapse. It doesn't require you to start crying or be on the floor or take on really big emotions. And you don't have to feel bad to be accountable. You can still be accountable for the action, understand it, and move on from it. Now, this reminds me actually of a story with my oldest son. So when he was, I want to say like 1.5, we were at this place. I don't remember where the place was, but I remember that he was having a nap and I had the baby monitor, but it was very loud in the house and he was crying and I didn't hear the baby monitor going off. And for years, I felt so horrible about having, I don't know how long he was crying for, and I felt so horrible about it because I was like, this is not how I wanted to show up as a parent. I was wanting to be very supportive as a parent and really active in their lives and wanting to respond to their needs as they needed to. And I felt so bad about this for years. And I thought about this for years. And I started talking about generational pattern changes and healing nervous system. And I said, what if I just take accountability for that? And I apologized to my son about what had happened when he was 1.5 and how will that help me? So I ended up taking responsibility for that instead of feeling in the emotion of feeling so bad and feeling so guilty about it. I was like, I'm just going to take accountability for that. Yes, that happened. It doesn't make me a bad mom, but that had happened. And I have learned from it and I was able to integrate those learnings going forward with my future children. And I apologized to him and he laughed about it because he's 10. He'd be laughing about it because I don't remember that, Mom. I don't remember that happening. I just wanted to let him know that I apologized, I repaired that situation. And it really goes to show you that repair is possible at any given time. It doesn't matter that years had passed. I was able to repair that one moment in time that was really sitting heavy on me. And he acknowledged that and received that apology and accountability. You don't have to feel bad to be accountable. And quite honestly, after I was able to release that with him, I can look back at that situation and be like, okay, you know what? I took accountability and I don't have those feelings of guilt or I don't feel bad about it anymore. For some nervous systems, and it depends on the way that we've grown up, if we provide softness in those moments, it may feel like, oh, we're getting away with it and we need to have harsh punishments. But safety does not remove responsibility, it makes it possible. Safety makes it possible to be able to have a regulated nervous system. And the softness doesn't mean that you're getting away with it. It just means that you're giving yourself grace in those moments to allow yourself to take responsibility, to allow yourself to regulate your nervous system so that you can then go back to what had ever had happened and come back with a level head and have a conversation or repair what happened or do those things so that you can let go of any of those other feelings like guilt or fear and really just focus on the accountability piece. You can take accountability and responsibility without attacking yourself. I'm going to say that again because it's so important for us as mothers and as parents to remember. You can take responsibility without attacking yourself. No one's perfect and we all make mistakes. And that's something I teach my kids all the time. No one's perfect. It's okay. We can all make mistakes. We can all take responsibility. And we don't have to feel unwell about ourselves because something had happened. Because repair is always possible. Repair is tricky for some people because they may think that maybe it's a form of regression, or maybe it's fueled by shame, or maybe it's something that just feels unnatural because we've never witnessed it before in our lives. But let's reframe what repair actually is. So it's not a confession of whatever had happened. It's not an apology that's fueled by shame, but what it is a regulated return to connection. You're connecting, you're regulating your return to connection. Children can feel or repair in a variety of different ways. If you felt dysregulated and had an event that happened, these are some ways that you can help your child. They can feel repair through a variety of different ways. So number one is through presence, sitting with them, maybe after a moment, or just being with them, maybe having your hand on their leg or giving them a cuddle, things like that. Through your tone. So not snappy, not being snappy, but being very regulated and loving in your conversation. And then also through your nervous system availability, being releasing of that freeze mode and having that understanding of your nervous system. Repair isn't about proving that you're a good parent. It's about restoring safety in the relationship. And I shared this story, actually. I did a talk back in September. And I shared this story about my 5-year-old we have a dehumidifier in the basement. And it was full of water and he had spilt it all over the basement floor. And at the same time my 1-year-old was crying. The water was all over the floor. There's another child who needed something. And I just got so dysregulated so fast. And I was stomping down the stairs to clean up the water and throwing things around and having a big huff. And then I realized in that moment that as I was walking up the stairs after I had cleaned everything up, I realized that he made a mistake. And my nervous system went offline during that moment. And I realized that what was more important in that moment was restoring that safety of making mistakes, because that's what I want as a family unit, is that it's safe to make mistakes and not get reprimanded for it or get anger or fear from the mistakes, as I had grown up with a lot of fear and anger when I had made mistakes. I learned to hide those mistakes or feel like you have to be perfect. And that's where this idea of perfection is born in a lot of millennial moms. I know if you know what I'm talking about, there's a lot of feeling like we need to be perfect. Showing up when we have children and we just deliver a baby. Yeah, I'm fine. I don't need anything. Or when you're quietly going through a really big moment and you feel like you want to reach out to people, but you feel like, you know what? No, I can't, because I have to show up that I'm being perfect. And that's really hard. That comes from a frame of not being able to show our mistakes and not being able to feel like welcomed and safe in making those mistakes. The shift of regulation and repair is that it's about restoring safety in the relationship. And that's what I was able to do with my son in that moment, was repair the safety net for him to be able to make mistakes in the future. So I had apologized to him. I got down on his level. I said, hey, bud, I'm really sorry. I reacted very poorly in this situation. And I know you made a mistake and it's okay to make mistakes and it's all good. And we went about our day and it was fabulous. Sometimes repair can be delayed, and that's okay as well. Like I shared the story with my oldest son when he was 1.5, and I repaired that at 10 years old for him. But sometimes we're really dysregulated, and it's important to regulate ourselves first and then repair second. Waiting until you're regulated is part of that responsibility. As conscious parents and as parents who are looking to repair and create a safe environment for our families, change always follows safety. Safety is number one, and then that change will always follow, and not adding extra pressure to yourself. A nervous system under threat cannot rewire, and we want to integrate the learnings that we have, the healing that we have. The best way to do that is to have a nervous system that's not constantly under threat. This happens even if your intentions are the strongest of intentions. That nervous system needs to be regulated before we can make any change. Things that build actual consistency are reducing that self-threat in your system, increasing your capacity, and repeating safe experiences. And whatever that may look like for you and your body and your system and your family, that can look different for every single person. What does it look like to reduce self-threat, increase your capacity, and repeat safe experiences? And that actually helps build consistency in our nervous system to regulate ourselves even faster. Dismantle the myth of being harder on yourself will make it stick, because that never works. Responsibility that collapses your nervous system isn't responsibility, it's threat. Whenever that nervous system is collapsed, it's actually a threat to your nervous system. And being harder on yourself doesn't solve that. What solves that is that kindness and grace and softness of your nervous system, so that you can fully integrate, so that it happens quicker for you in the long run. So a lot of this is about a softer way of holding yourself. What happens inside you after a hard moment? What happens inside you after a hard moment? Do you feel a lot of guilt and fear? Do you feel mad about yourself? Do you feel like you could have done better? Or can we reframe that and hold a lot of softness and gentle ability in there? Can we take responsibility and hold that with steadiness, but not punish ourselves for that? I just want to remind you that you're not behind. Your system is learning the pace that it needs in order to allow safety return to your nervous system. This work isn't about becoming a different mother. It's about becoming a safer one for you, your child, and for every single generation that comes after you. It's not easy work being a conscious parent. Responsibility rooted in safety changes everything, because it finally gives your nervous system room to grow. If this episode spoke to you, I'd invite you to come to our Regulated Mom WhatsApp group, where we can help support any way possible. It's a safe room to allow yourself to be whatever way you want to be. It's available in the show notes below. We would love to have you there. Until next week, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of the Legacy Shift podcast.